Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. It's always a pleasure to do the CREtech events. Piers and I actually, in the early days before it was called CREtech or CREtech, or if you're in the UK, PropTech, it was really early on when this was going on. And in fact, the Center for Real Estate started looking at it. And I think the first event we did, we had 12 companies to choose from for that panel. And in the Real Estate Innovation Lab now, our list is over 3,000 startup companies in 5 years in the real estate tech space globally. Brad Greiwe from Fifth Wall says that his list is over 6,000, which I have no doubt that's true because they have a bigger net. But whether it's 3 or 6, it is a lot of companies that are out there impacting our industry, and many of you in the room are on that list. I think aside from the head count, the count of actual companies is also the VC story about how much VC is going into the space. So I'll talk about that a little bit. I'll share some of the trends that we're seeing, and just to quickly go over it, we'll talk a little bit about what we call the Great Convergence, and then we'll talk about the startup tsunami, and then this concept that we have at the center called real estate fracking, and then a little bit about the UI, UX, and DI of real estate. I'll explain what that is. And those are the 4 topics. So the Great Convergence, not all of it, much of this won't come as a surprise to you. We're in a situation right now on a number of areas, social, behavioral, and technology. It's not only about technology, but we have this convergence, first of all, in the tech space, unprecedented breakthroughs in technology, the hardware, the software. The iPhone's 10 years old, more technology in this than the entire Apollo program. It's really a different world, and it's only going to be more and more accelerated. Also, ubiquitous connectivity, broadband. We all lived through broadband becoming ubiquitous, Wi-Fi, 4G, and now 5G is rolling out. Is 5G rolling out in Chicago yet? Are they a little bit? It's happening in Boston. You'll see the big boxes on the bottom of the light poles. And so just briefly, the impact of 5G is an exponential increase in bandwidth, an exponential increase in processing speed. It will enable the promise of autonomous vehicles and smart buildings and smart cities. We're limited by the infrastructure right now, but as 5G rolls out, there will be tremendous gains made in that kind of interactivity and data gathering and analytics. And the standards will either be set by the US, Asia, or Europe. That's unclear at this point. But that's what's happening in connectivity. But just to give you an idea, 3G, 4G, 5G, the total time to download a 2-hour movie under 3G to your phone was 26 hours. A 2-hour movie to your phone, 3G, 26 hours. 4G, 6 minutes. 5G, 3.6 seconds. That's a crazy amount of speed and bandwidth. And so just imagine what we'll be able to do from a technology standpoint when that happens. So moving on to, well, an increasingly tech-savvy workforce. Everybody knows that, right? Where are the millennials in the room? Millennials? Few of you? Okay, good. Good. Hope you enjoyed the headlines for the last couple of years. There's another group coming up behind you that's bigger called the Zs. So check out the Zs. They're the first fully native digital generation. They're different in some ways, but really, you know, millennials, you got picked on a little bit over the years. Everybody is changing. We're all going from a world where our private lives work off of this. Why is it that our offices don't work off this? And let's face it, we're in an industry, commercial real estate industry, that's running off of a 40-year-old technology called the spreadsheet. VisiCalc turns 40 years old this year, 39 and a half. So we're going to have dramatic changes when this tech adoption starts impacting our industry, and it's going to be pushed by the workers, by the talent that we're all competing for. So that's what's happening a little bit to the workforce. And then lastly, this continued growth of the sharing economy, everything on demand, and also an commitment aversion. So we want everything now. We only want to pay for what we use. We don't want long-term commitments. We want flexibility. That is going to run into an industry where we build assets to last 200 years and we depreciate them over 40 years, and it takes us 20 years to get it built, and we have 10-year leases with 2 5-year renewals. It's just going to have to sort that out. So there could be a little tension, I think, along the line. Okay, so that's the great convergence that's going on. So then, as Piers mentioned, and I mentioned a little bit about it, there's this startup tsunami, a tremendous number of companies in the last 4.5 years that we've been following this at the Center for Real Estate. And the telling number is VC. that's gone into this is real estate tech only. First half of the year, Duke, $1 billion into construction tech, separate from real estate tech, $1 billion into construction tech, I think, right? I think. But anyway, so 2011, real estate tech, $1 billion. 2017, $12 billion. Now, you could back out the big slug to WeWork and one to Compass, and you could back out Airbnb and a few of the other ones, but even if it's $9 billion, that's an immense amount of money for our industry. I was at lunch with some of you today, and we were talking about how that number pales to the drug business, the car business, computer chips, all of the other industries. But for our industry, that's a tremendous amount of money that's going into startups that are changing how we do business. And where's this coming from? Well, early on, it was coming from some conventional VCs. A lot of it was bootstrapped. Those of you who are in growth stage now, you probably could tell better stories about this when you were startups. But it was really hard to find the right money from the right people because the money didn't understand the real estate industry. This has changed in the last 18 months. I would say the change happened when Fifth Wall raised the big first fund at 240 million. But what's interesting to note, on Fifth Wall, Navitas now is raising another fund. JLL Spark just did a $100 million fund. This is strategic VC. You'll notice the companies that are putting money into these funds are actually you. They're us that are putting the money in. It's this virtuous circle where we invest on one side and we deploy on the other side. That's different than traditional VC that doesn't really know how to deploy. This money knows how to deploy. So that I think is going to accelerate it. And then also Brookfield, Prologis, Colliers, Simon, Lendlease, all have some investing. They're doing some direct investments themselves. They have some funds, and they're still putting money in through outside funds. So it's happening in 3 or 4 different channels, but bottom line is there's a lot of money going into it. And as Brad does say, he says that VCs are funding R&D for the real estate industry. We've never had this. We're not like the car business, the drug business, the tech business, where the companies get together and they build a skunk works and they hire a lot of smart people and put a lot of money into it. We now have this going on. The VCs are funding this for us. And I think it may be because real estate has been sort of project in our approach. We're project-based rather than long-term industry-based. So that's what the impact is of the tsunami. Let me talk about real estate fracking. By the way, this is me not on caffeine. Real estate fracking. So my friend Dennis Frenchman, who I work with, you know fracking, oil and gas fracking, right? They put the oil and the gas into the ground, it breaks the shale up and unlocks the value that was orphaned in the ground. Real estate fracking is taking the asset, breaking it up, the use of the asset, breaking it up and reconfiguring it into higher value combinations. Breaking the asset up into different pieces and reconfiguring it. So there's some good real estate examples of that. 2 big good examples. WeWork and Airbnb. WeWork, the largest office occupier in New York City now, second largest in London next to the government. Airbnb, the largest hotel operation in the world, doesn't own a bed. So in both cases, they were playing the arbitrage or the empty room. In Airbnb's case, the empty room. In WeWork's case, the arbitrage between space use and optimizing, generally speaking. So this is what we have been referring to as this fracking idea. Because we know that the spread on WeWork, you lease it at 1x and license it out at 6x, so that's how that works. We all know that. But the co-working, but I want to talk about co-working in general, just to give you a bit of an update on what we're seeing. A graph of the total percentage of co-working users in the United States. Top graph, freelance and independent workers. This is from 2010 to 2017. So you'll see that the top graph was 2010. 2017 is the bottom bar, half the size. So the freelance workers and the small users have dropped in half as a percentage of the total pie. The key thing to look at, though, is down here, corporate. Above 100 employees, that's a 6-fold increase. So what has happened, and I think we've seen it, 3 years ago, if I'd asked corporate occupiers who's using co-working in your portfolios, I wouldn't have gotten any hands. Now you'll see a lot of hands. So corporate occupiers are starting to recognize that co-working as a means using a third-party provider, pushing the risk off them, having flexibility. There are a lot of reasons why co-working is really good for corporate occupiers. It's not only WeWork, we know that. It's industrious and no-tell, and HQ by We, which is a corporate provider. You'll be hearing from Craig Robinson later on. Convene, TOG, the office group, huge co-working company in Europe, got bought by Blackstone. So Blackstone's pretty smart. So they're onto something. So co-working is here to stay. There are a lot of operators. But now the developers and owners recognize, why should I give my margins away to a third party? Can I do it myself? So you have Flex by BXP, Studio by Tishman Speyer just got announced. Hines and EQ Office have also announced their own solutions where they realize that this is a service they need to provide in their buildings. And as good as WeWork is, Regus has been around for 30 years. So WeWork is just the hip version of Regus. So it's enabled by technology, and you have to know what you're doing. I'm not suggesting that it's easy, but big smart developers are able to do this. JLL tells us that 5% of the current US office inventory is controlled by flexible space providers. Now that's flexible space, that's not just co-working. But by 2030 it could be 30%. Even if our friend Ben Breslau and his team are off by 50%. It's still a huge number. I'm not saying he is, I'm sure he's accurate on this. So it's a big number, it's going to have a huge impact. That's on the co-working side. But it's not just office. It's not just office. There's co-working for biotech called biolabs. There's co-working for cyber technology out in San Diego called CyberTech. The Food Loft for food in Boston. Paragon, anybody here a Paragon user? Co-working for cannabis. You didn't look like a Paragon user here in the audience. I just thought I'd ask. But it's true. It's true. Impact Hub is global. Hera Hub is all women. Founders, Restore, Bulletin, Bespoke, all retail solutions. Industrious has a retail solution as well. So these are just examples of non-office kind of fracking. Again, they're looking at optimizing the space and making more money out of the space than we used to make. WorkBar is an interesting one. They are a suburban co-working network in Boston. So suburban is an interesting aspect because many of the big brands are only in the cities. But they also just put 3 into Staples stores. So what does Staples have a lot of? Space. They've got a lot of space. So that's a double frack. That's putting co-working inside of a Staples store, which I think is one of these clever, interesting ideas and approaches. Okay, so let's get out of the co-working. Let's just look at fracking other ideas. Liquid space. People familiar with liquid space? Mark Gilbreath was around early on, right? He's a great guy. Liquid space, empty boardrooms is what it started as, empty boardrooms so that you could kind of Uber empty boardrooms on demand somewhere downtown if you needed a boardroom. Pivot desk, empty cubicles when they were left during the down cycle, half floors of cubicles. Could you go in and rent them by the day, by the week, monetize them? And the users didn't have to make long commitments. Better spaces, pop-up amenities in buildings. That's going on right now. They'll take any space in the building, the worst space you have, and they'll do the yoga classes and the pet care and cooking classes. And then they'll move if you need the space. These are some retail solutions. Appear here in storefront or pop-ups. Story, Macy's just put a bunch of money into Story. That's a little more curated. That's kind of a hybrid of co-working and pop-up and curated. So those are retail solutions. Ollie and Y Hotel on the multifamily side. Ollie is was just in the Wall Street Journal, is co-living. I think we'll start to see more co-living. It's very big in Europe, not so much here. But again, optimizing the space. Y Hotel. Any multifamily people? Multifamily people? A few? Y Hotel, have you done a trial at all? Interesting. Some guys from Vornado said, can we pop hotels up in multifamily temporarily? What do you have when you're going through lease up? You got empty rooms. So can you pop up a high-end hotel, monetize the rooms, and then when they're at 80 or 90%, then they're out? A little different than the Airbnb approach, but similar. These are solutions on the industrial side. That's also, industrial was a little late, right, Jeff? A little late in the tech, but these are some interesting solutions. I think dark store, pop-up last 50-foot distribution. Amazon still needs to get it to your doorstep, but can they, like the Better Spaces people, can they go into the back of the second floor overlooking the dumpsters where nobody wants that space? Can they do pop-up distribution? And then if they need to be moved, they can move to another floor, another building. These are solutions, they'll almost go into any space. They started in New York doing empty tables in the middle of the afternoon in restaurants. I don't know. They got funded. Will they survive? We don't know. But I like the thinking, empty tables in the middle of the afternoon, right? Nobody's in them. Can you make money off of them? Maybe. Smarking is a parking solution from some MIT founders. Parking's a separate conversation. We've done some research in the center on it, but we do know that many developments make more money off parking than they do off their tenants. Last one, Recharge. Anybody used Recharge yet? This is hotel rooms by the minute. Oh, come on, the joke wrote itself. Come on. But I'm not kidding. They have, I think, the Pierre in New York, maybe some W hotels, some Hyatts. Same kind of thing. You've got hotel rooms empty in the middle of the afternoon. Can we Uber them out or zip car them out so that you can make phone calls? Okay. But the point here, my friend Mark Grinnis at EY, he says that the key takeaway here is commercial real estate is no longer a fixed asset, it's fluid. I don't know, where are my friends from EY? Does the auditing side worry about him saying that? I always wonder about that. But you know, is real estate more flexible? Is it fluid? Is it not necessarily a fixed asset? Well, that's kind of the approach to all that fracking stuff. So that's fracking. By the way, I'm going to be around later if you have questions about this, because we've got a good program today. UI, UX, DI. Let me focus on the UI and UX. Chase Garbarino from HQO points out that we're really looking at the user experience less and less about the asset. That goes along with the previous quote. We're looking at the user experience. So there are a whole bunch of solutions that are, and some of them are here, so you should go talk to them, a whole bunch of solutions that are involved with our interaction with the building. The first group is really the passive interaction. These are using beacons and Wi-Fi and other ways to understand where we are and how we use space and to, I know Chase doesn't like me to say optimize, because we know that there are some decreasing returns if you optimize too far because people are unhappy. But nonetheless, this is a way to better use our space and understand how the users want to use the space. Then there's another group, this group, this is office, this is residential. This is where we interact with our tenants to understand what our tenants want and try to learn from them. And this can be security, this can be ordering food, this can be any one of a number of things that happen on a daily basis in the building. The last group I put in here separately because these are the ones that are crowdsourced. This data is crowdsourced. This is especially Crowd Comfort and Comfy. This is I'm hot, I'm cold, and I dial. I don't really text in, but I communicate in. I initiate as a tenant, rather than the landlord communicating with me, initiating the communication. These are all worth taking a look at. Tenovox is, it's Yelp for office buildings. Uh-oh. Yelp for office buildings. So the question is, do we really want our tenants publicly saying whether they like their building or not, or, you know, so just to put it on your radar, just so that you know it's there. So that's the UI and the UX. Chris Kelly from Convene, this is really important. What the talent wants, landlords need, developers must build. What the talent wants, landlords need, developers must build. This is really different. I'm a recovering developer. This is really different from doing market research. You have a sense of what product the market needs, you build it. You may get feedback from your master tenant, but the users, you never really used to talk to the users. Now we can talk to the users so that we know what's going on. And we can make adjustments on what we're delivering into the market. Okay, let's talk about the DI. This is the digital interface. We talked about, by the way, UI is user interface. For those of you tech people, you know what I'm talking about. UX, sometimes we talk about the user experience. It's supposed to be clever, but anyway, the UI, UX. DI, digital interface. What do I mean by that? Everybody seen Pokemon Go? Seen Pokemon Go? Yeah. So this is, for those of you who haven't seen it, Pokemon Go, this is a real house. This is the house through my phone, and then this is superimposed on the front. So Niantic, I think, is the company. They still generate $2 million a day on this. In 2 years, they've generated $1.8 billion on this ridiculous game. And people are still walking out into traffic and walking off cliffs and all kinds, trespassing and all kinds of stuff. So this is augmented reality. This is one version of digital interface. This is augmented reality. You have some real and some digital. Okay, so now you can go to Wayfair or IKEA and you can look at that chair in their catalog and you can see it in your apartment or your house. And then if you like it, you tap on it and they'll send it to you and they'll charge your credit card. So that's pretty cool. That's augmented reality. And then this was leaked. This is Apple glasses. I think Apple will get the glasses right. Google didn't, but Apple, I'm pretty confident Apple will get the glasses right. So this is the Ferrari that I have in my garage, and as long as all of my friends are wearing their AR-enabled glasses, it looks like I own a Ferrari. It's not really there, but this is what it'll look like. So this is augmented reality. It'll be called, some of it's called mixed reality. It's happening in design on the residential side. Saltmine and Pandora are examples of, on the design side, I scan the office with my iPad, and then I can fully outfit the office with all of the, all the furniture and the cubicles and the desks and the partitions, and then I have a budget and I can start subtracting and adding, I can change colors, and eventually, I know they're not there yet, but eventually it'll be like Wayfair where you tap on what you want and you send the order in right from the iPad. So that's the kind of thing that's happening on the design side. But take it in a different direction. How about maintenance and inspection? What if we could either put glasses on or we could use the phone and we could go around and see the systems in the building. So Reflect One is maintenance. DACRI has glasses for construction. So these are just areas on operations where if we have that kind of superimposed experience in the building, how will that change the way we interact? That leads to digital twins. Digital twins. This is when the physical and the physical and the virtual worlds come together. The physical and the virtual worlds come together. We were talking about this at lunch. Imagine this building in an exact duplicate, but only digital. It's digital because we've got all these sensors and we've got all this data and we've got the processing capability now so that we can have an exact duplicate of the building electronically. And so that means that we can design and test and construct and build and manage and maintain everything without ever having to go into the building. And just think about what that means for maintenance and security. This will be coming on. It's still very much in its infancy. It builds off of 5D BIM. But Dassault and SAP, they're already doing it on jet fighters and they're doing it on big energy plants. So Invicara and Willow are real estate versions of it. And this is just to give you a little bit of a sense of it. It was the best picture I could find. So you can see it's the superimposed system on top of the existing system. Last thing on this, given all this digital stuff, refer to this as digital asset management. What happens when the world looks like this? So it gives you a little bit of a headache, but those of you who can't see, it's got the street name and the routes on the buses and the taxi, but this is the key thing right here. All that advertising, what do you suppose is under that? There's a building under that, right? So the question is, who owns that advertising? Because remember, it's in my glasses, it's not on the building. If I took my glasses off, it would be a naked building. So who owns that? So that's a good question. And also, who controls it? If it's the McDonald's world headquarters up the street, do I really want Burger King projecting through my glasses, through the delivery system, which chances are it'll be Google. But whoever it is, do I really want, I want to buy that virtual space? Who controls it? I would argue that the building owners should be taking control of it. And if it's not written into leases yet, it should be that I control the digital rights to the building. So that could be the next, that could be some future steps in this digital interface. So the key takeaways, we've got convergence of technology and demographics and behaviors. We talked about that. CREtech is industry R&D. Thank you, Brad Greiwe. We've got fracking, also real estate as a service or space as a service. Whatever you call it, it's unlocking value. The UI and the UX, we've got the DI. The last thing that I didn't talk about, given that so many of these business models are short-term, on-demand, by the minute, no commitment, stickiness becomes really, really important. So that discussion about the UI and the UX, we need to figure out how to get people to stay in our buildings, and whether it's the digital interface where we entertain them, we need to make them happy. That's because stickiness, I think stickiness is going to become more and more important because of these new business models that are going to disrupt the commitment relationship and really the relationship between real estate and people in general. So, final thoughts. Bill Gates says we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years, and we underestimate the change that will occur in 10 years. So I covered a lot of material, and it's kind of makes my head spin every day because I live with this stuff every day. we overestimate. Blockchain was hot, autonomous vehicles were hot, AI's hot right now. It'll be something new tomorrow or on the hype cycle. But we underestimate the change in 10. We get 10 years down the road and we say, wow, what the heck happened to our industry? I also like this quote from Elon Musk, I'd like to die on Mars, just not on impact. So it's going to be a little messy along the way. It's going to be messy. We're going to have to learn, and the technology still isn't proven, and the companies are still young. Even the ones that are in growth stage are still young. They're figuring it out. And
we're in beta testing right now.
You may have seen this with the night scope. Have you seen this? These robots, these are patrol robots for the parking lot. And they're getting pretty good traction. It's like a droid from Star Wars. They're cool. They've got cameras and sensors, and I don't know if it has a taser in it, but it's pretty cool. But they haven't completely figured it out yet. So there are going to be bumps in the road. We'll get through the bumps in the road. I do like the guy with the matching boots. That's kind of cool. But there will be bumps in the road. But I think when we get on the other side, the industry will be unrecognizable, and we're going to be able to do really magical things.